Real quick, before we start this podcast episode, I just want to say thank you for tuning into the Marc Colcer podcast. I know you've got a million things that you could be doing right now, and the fact that you're taking time out of your day to watch this podcast episode truly means the world to me, and I just want to say thank you for that. If you'd like to continue to support the podcast, right below this video, if you could hit the subscribe button, and then, hey, if you got some more time and you want to hit the download button, the comment button, the like button, the share button, any of those buttons, it's greatly, greatly appreciated. It helps for other people to find out about the podcast, and it helps for you to be notified about future episodes. So if you guys could take a quick second, hit the subscribe button, I would really appreciate that. Outside of that, this episode and every other episode is brought to you guys by Roast Umber Coffee. As some of you guys know, I co-founded Roast Umber Coffee, and we have the greatest farmers in Guatemala and Honduras and the greatest roaster in Grand Rapids, Michigan, all to bring you guys the greatest cup of coffee possible. So if you'd like to try it out, go to our website, use the coupon code MARC30, and you're going to get 30% off your coffee. Now on to the episode. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Welcome to the Marc Colcer Podcast. I've been looking forward to this episode since we first connected a few months ago. And at the time, I didn't really know a ton about you. I saw Pudgy Penguins pretty much everywhere. Didn't really know why I knew Pudgy Penguins. It was legitimately everywhere. And then I spent some time actually looking into you, learning more about your background. Your story's crazy. We'll get into all of that today, but there's just so much to tap into. So let's just get started with it.
I'm ready to go, and thanks for having me. And thank you for being patient, by the way.
Oh, dude, no problem at all. But so for people who don't know who you are, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Luca Netz. I'm 24 years old. I've been a serial entrepreneur for the last 6 years, and now I'm the CEO of Pudgy Penguins.
Yeah, there we go. So first off, I want to get into your childhood. So from what I'm understanding, you dropped out of high school at 16 years old. Am I right on that?
Yeah.
So what was your mindset at the time? What was your reasoning for that? All that.
Yeah, so I haven't really dived into the details too much, but I'm enjoying this interview and I'm enjoying your setup. But I remember the moment really vividly. I was with my mom and my best friend at the time, and we were eating at a sandwich spot. And my friend was like, hey, we don't have enough money for weed. Can you steal some money out of your mom's wallet and help us out? I was like, yeah, I got you. And when my mom went to the bathroom, coincidentally, I took $8 out of her wallet. And when I came home later that day, after we went off on our little adventure, she came to me and she said, hey, did you steal the $8 out of my wallet? And I said, yeah. And she started crying. And she was like, I really needed that. And that was the moment for me. A week later, I am watching a YouTube video that basically is a guy talking. And my mom and I had a really tough relationship when I became a teenager because I blamed her for how miserable our life was. And so when she cried about me stealing the money out of her wallet, I had an epiphany. It hit me like a brick wall. And I was like, okay, I'm going to learn. I'm going to fix this situation. And so a week into, fixing that situation, I'm going through this YouTube rabbit hole of entrepreneurship. And there's a guy speaking at a Stanford class, and he's a high-level entrepreneur. I forget who it was. And he said the first thing and the most important thing that you have to do is 1, stop comparing your life to others. 2, stop feeling sorry for yourself. And 3, take accountability for your life, because the reason why you're here today is because you decided to be here and that you worked to be here. And so the first epiphany was the situation with my mom. And the one that really made me turn it up a notch was watching that YouTube video. And so these 2 really impactful moments in a week's span. And so I hadn't thought about dropping out of school, but after I watched that YouTube video, I slept that night. I woke up, 8 o'clock, I get to school. I go to the dean's office. So I was super studious. I had this weird super skater degenerate type of vibe to me, holes in my hoodies and my shoes. But I had this thing where I wanted to be a degenerate, contrarian, but I wanted to have straight A's so that they couldn't tell me anything. I was the type of kid to walk into school with a t-shirt with some vulgar phrase, but I wanted the attention and create that drama and them knowing that I'm a straight A student. So I walked into the dean me and the dean were really familiar with each other, and she was trying to like coach me, like, why are you such a problem child, but you're so smart, so what's this issue? And I basically told her, I was like, hey, I want to leave school. What's the best way? So in layman's terms, I tell people I dropped out, but I really tested out. So I took something called the CHESP. It's the California high school proficiency exam. And so a couple weeks later, I'm studying for the test. I take it, I ace it, and then I'm out of school. And I'm going on a tangent. I hope you don't mind.
No, this is awesome. I love it.
Because we're talking about the story, might as well. I actually tell people, most people think the story goes, I dropped out of school and got a job at Ring. But there's actually about 6 months in between that where I'm pursuing my rap career. So for those of you guys who don't know, this is a really funny one, but I wanted to be like a rapper. And then I realized that I didn't have the same talent as everybody else. Like I was forcing it. But I started throwing like rap shows. And so I would do this thing where I would go to like the Hood, South Central, Compton, and I would take these little warehouses that were like empty, and I would rent them out for a couple grand a night. And I would book some sort of underground artist or rapper at the time for a couple grand. I'd be all in $5-6 grand on the venue and the artist. I would charge $10-20 at the door. Venue held 400 or 500 people. I was clocking $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a night. I was probably doing these events once every 6 to 8 weeks. And then I realized I was getting away with it because I was underage at the time. And so cops were shutting it down every single time. But because my signature wasn't binding, I was getting away with getting in trouble. They would say, hey, who's in charge of this event? Everyone would point towards me. I would say, hey, I'm in charge of it, but I'm a minor. So what am I really in charge of? And then the liability would always go back to the owner. Eventually, word was getting around that like, Luca's underage. Things were slowing down. There was a lot of risk, a lot for low reward relatively. And so I did the math. I was like, well, I'm really only making about 40 grand a year here. And there's a lot of effort and it's kind of dangerous and there's a lot of liability. So, I could probably just get a job and make probably around the same amount. And so I took 100 resumes. I printed them out. I went up and down Melrose and Fairfax trying to get a job in one of like the hip stores. No, everyone turned me down. And then I went to Tech Row in Santa Monica and I started handing them out. And so I was thankful enough to come across probably the most rinky-dink startup in Tech Row at the time, which was a company called Ring Doorbell. And I handed my resume to one of the guys there and they gave me a job and I was one of their first employees, which I think was like the start of the entrepreneurship journey because I always wanted to be successful. I think money's at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, especially in these like major metropolitan cities where like everything is about money. Los Angeles, I think, is the epicenter of that. You can't not want money and live in the city. But that really motivated me to want to build big companies. Now, I hadn't realized that at the time. I was still like, hey, make money. Like you have to get over the money hump first. But I was like, I saw what Jamie did. And I wanted that for myself. So I'm sorry for the tangent, but I thought I just should.
No, that was awesome because I was actually going to ask you the question of how did you end up working at Ring? Because even though it was a small tech startup at the time, I was like, how do you, in all the interviews I've listened to previously, you go, I dropped out of high school basically around 16, and then I started working at Ring shortly after. And to me, I was like, well, there's got to be a time period between that. And also, how did you make that happen? So I was curious how all that ended up happening out, but I love that. And I can totally relate to the underground rap shows because I was doing the same thing in high school, but what I was doing basically didn't work. And so it was something where I didn't understand essentially what people should be paid. And so I was overpaying the hell out of everybody and I was losing a ton of money.
Yep.
And my parents were always big on like, hey, this is your money. You got to make the money and like pay all of that back and just keep learning your lesson with it. So eventually went off to college and started putting on big festivals and things like that. And it ended up going really well. But at the time, had to learn from those mistakes. And so it's interesting kind of seeing some of the parallels from our early childhood like that. But so where do you think like the motivation came from for you at such a young age to like
I guess, have that sort of entrepreneurial mindset? Because to me, it's really easy for somebody at like 25 years old to have that sort of mindset. But when you're 16 years old and you're dropping out of school, I feel like a lot of people would look at it and go, well, the world's against me. I know you said you watched that video, but it's easy to watch a video like that and then still not get up and change anything, right? So you had the mindset of like, I'm going to go and fix these problems that are present in my life, and I'm not going to blame my situation. I'm just going to go out there and fix it. Where do you think that sort of drive came from?
So there's an interesting part of my story in my childhood. And for about 9-10 years, my mom, my brother, and I didn't have a home. And so we weren't pushing carts on the street, fortunately, and we weren't staying in shelters. The situation was we were just bouncing around from friends' home and family, like whoever would take us in at the time. Eventually, we'd welcome our stay because two young boys always fighting. You know, my brother and I didn't, I think, fully grasp the situation. It seemed normal, but I think we didn't make it easy on the hosts that were hosting us. And so there was a lot, me and my brother fought like insane amounts. And there's one thing in that story that I think people don't really understand, which is it wasn't all bad. So it wasn't like 10 years of hell. It wasn't that. Because there would be moments where we'd stay at friends' houses who were really well off, like extremely well off. Like there was a year and a half we spent in the Hamptons, right? One of the richest places in the world, staying in, $5-10 million homes, right? So my mom had some good friends. We also had some really bad friends, and we would stay in like the gutter and tough spots, right? But this duality of life is something I understood really early on, where I saw how we behaved and how good life was when we were in these good situations. And I saw what had gotten those people there, which was building companies and entrepreneurship. And then I had also saw the really rough side of life, which is like complete misery, like hungry, like how are we like very uncomfortable, sleeping on the floor, things like that. And so really early on, my brain was able to develop and process the dualities of life and how it was to be really poor and to be really rich, and what were those key differentiators between the people that lived really poor and lived really rich. And so I didn't realize this until later on, but a lot of people, because my story is a unique one. I didn't really understand the severity of how cool my story was until I really started talking about it. But in hindsight, it's like, oh, whoa, I really shouldn't be here, right? It's just like one of those really unique and fascinating stories. And so when I look back at it and, okay, so what are the moments in life that shape me into the human that I am? Because I do think I'm different. That plays a huge part, because a lot of people don't understand the duality of that. Like, I've been poor and I've been rich, and I know which one's better. Most people say that when they're like 25 or 30 or 40. I knew what that was when I was 12, right? I knew the severity of that. And so for me, unfortunately, growing up, in my early teenage years, it was get it by any means necessary, right? And so I grew up with like the bad group and the bad flock. But again, I think that's part of the duality of life, right? Like I think my superpower, if you were to ask me, hey, where do you think you excel? I think it's perspective, and marketing is really my superpower. But you can't market if you don't understand perspective. You don't have empathy, and you don't understand different personalities. I know every walk of life because I've been a part of every walk of life within reason, right? Not every single walk of life, but a majority of different walks. I've walked the walk. So that, I think, is played a huge part as to like, how did I get this fire? And I think just some people, I wished it the other way for a very long time, but I've realized that some people have it and some people don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you get to see the other walk of life, I guess, when it comes to the rich and famous lifestyle too? And what I mean by that is like, so I grew up on a private golf course, right?
Nice.
And so I grew up decent, like Midwest well off, I would say. Not LA well off, Midwest well off. But when I was living in that neighborhood growing up, my parents were very open and honest with me. So they would look at me and they'd say, hey, the family down the road over there, husband cheats on his wife all the time. And I was like, oh, okay. Wow. Okay. That guy, extremely unhappy. Like that person, alcoholic. And so I started to learn that like, even though certain people would come across like they had their shit together and they had this beautiful life, a lot of times it was a facade, right? So did you get to see that at a young age too? Because I often in the interviews that I've seen of you, you've made a shit ton of money, and we'll go through all of that. you've been very successful in business, and you've also mentioned in that like money is not something that really has like, you kind of realized quickly money is not everything in life, right?
Yeah.
So did you get to experience that at a young age, or did it take until you started making money yourself to realize that?
Yeah, I actually thought growing up that money was everything. So I had this unrealistic expectation where the only moments where we were happy were environments where there was good financial support, right? The moments, and we spent a majority like of 10 years of homelessness, about 2.5 was like in these like nice environments. I'd say the other 7.5 was just like hell, right? And so I had this really skewed spectrum of money, how I perceived it, where it was like money was happiness, and not having money was hell. I mean, my mom, I look back at this today, but I don't know how she did it. Because if I put myself in her shoes, 2 boys, you know, she was illegal at the time, so she couldn't get like an actual job. It's not like she could go submit and get a job somewhere. You know, all by herself in America. English is not her first language, in one of the more expensive cities in the world, but she wanted us to be here because of the opportunity, i.e. like one of the reasons why I'm here today. I look back at that and I'm like, dude, how did you pull that off? Absolutely impossible. I don't care what I build. I could build a multi-billion-dollar business, a multi-hundred-billion-dollar business. I could not do what she did. And looking back at it, there was... sorry, I'm just like blanking down memory road. It's like really bringing me back.
No, you're good. Go wherever it takes you.
Yeah, I at its core, how money was perceived with me was really skewed. And so when I made my first $1 million at 19, I was like fortunate. I started my first business at 18. I found product market fit within 2 months. And within 8 months of running the business, we were doing $500,000, $1 million months, right? Really quickly, really fast. So I was fortunate and blessed in that respect. But when I turned 19, there was a really tough moment in my life that occurred where the bank account had hit the $1 million mark. I got my new car. So I had a really nice car. Closet and wardrobe was completely switched out. I was like getting things I never thought I could afford or buy. And I was really, really unhappy. Like extremely unhappy. Like very depressed. And so I went on what I like to call my pursuit of happiness. I was like, so what makes me happy? And I had like tried to recall moments in my teenage years that had made me happy. And there was one moment in specific that I had referenced. I was fortunate enough to get an internship at a skateboard company called Asphalt Yacht Club in New York City one summer. And I was 15. And I remember they gave me a huge box of clothes, like $15,000 worth of clothes at the time. And I remember putting it on my skateboard, taking it back to my stepdad's house. And on the way there, being so stoked because I was like, I'm going to sell this stuff on eBay. Like, finally, this is like a great moment to make a lot of money. And as I take the clothes on the train back to Queens, by the time I get to the house, the box is 4/5 of the way empty. And what I had done is I was giving it away to all of the homeless people on the subway and in the train station. And I remember the exact moment a woman had asked for me for a t-shirt. And when I gave it to her, she was so happy. And I was so captured by her happiness that I wanted to feel more of that. So I started giving it to everybody that I could possibly could on the train ride home. And so when I was 19 and I made my first $1 million and I was depressed, I remembered that moment. And I said, wow, helping people is what makes me happy. And so the best money I've ever spent is money I've spent on my mom, on my brother, on my stepdad, like on people that I love and care about, is exponentially more fulfilling than any dollar amount I've ever spent on myself. More so, the best money that I've ever spent, or the best time that I've ever spent, is helping people just in general. Even if it's not with direct value exchange, it's like, hey, how can I mentor you or help you or motivate you or inspire you? You know, for a very long time, people didn't really know who I was until I was 20, because I was told by all like the older, rich guys from back in my past that like when you make money, you want to be in the shadows, right? Like you don't want people to know who you are if you make a lot of money. And it's actually really strange because like I completely disagree. I think I have an obligation to tell people and to inspire and to motivate, because if like I'm in the shadows, how can I do that? And so the second I like took myself to the internet and the social and was really transparent about my growth, is I saw like the impact that I was having on others. And I was like, it pulled me out of this depression. It was really the ability to impact people that fulfilled me and filled this void that I felt like I had for my whole life, that I thought money would fill. And then when it didn't, and when that hole in my heart was still hollow, it was the helping of people that I was like, yes, I'm really proud of that. And so that's that.
No, I love that. I love that. That's a super cool. It's awesome to hear that. And I'm a big believer of speak your truth, because there's always something that somebody can relate to in some way or another, right? And so even though like we grew up in a lot of very different ways, there are also ways that we can still relate to each other and understand each other. But in order to do that, we have to speak our truth. We have to tell our story, right? And I feel like a lot of times people are ashamed of certain aspects of their childhood in some way or one way or another. And to me, I'm like, your truth is your truth. Like you're in the position that you're in today because of what you've gone through. No matter all of that has brought you to this point, right? And so, when you wonder why certain people act the way they act or why they do certain things, all of it stems back from how they were raised and what they went through and their experiences and everything like that. So if you want to know why somebody, does anything, just get to know them more and you'll learn exactly who they are from their childhood and their experiences that made them who they are today.
It's funny that you say that, because even as like nobody knew the homeless story until like 2 years ago, because I was so ashamed of that. But I was less ashamed of it, and I was more, my mom is really ashamed of it. Like my mom doesn't like me speaking about this, but I tell my mom like we made it and look who I've become. Like sure, that is maybe something that sucked at the time, but we've persevered past that. It's like another thing growing up. We had this like our first ever apartment. My mom was sleeping in the living room and she was renting the room to Airbnb. That was like one of the things that also kicked me into like, that's what like made me go obsessive. That was probably like the third pillar to pop. First one was the $8. The second one was the video. And then the third one was I didn't have a home because my mom was Airbnb-ing the room. We had a 1-bathroom apartment. And so I would literally like couldn't use the bathroom if I wanted to, like a really precarious, uncomfortable situation. And this is like key because we'll talk about the NFT space and everything. Like you have to be uncomfortable to win. You have to. You just absolutely have to. At least that's like how per my experience, like every time I've been uncomfortable is every time I've excelled and pushed the barrier higher. It's moments of comfort where I felt complacency, and complacency, I believe, breeds failure. And so even we'll talk about it in a sec, but like one of my businesses when I was 19, I started monetizing social influence. And I would literally sit back. I had a team and an assembly line set up where I was making millions of dollars and I didn't have to lift a finger. I literally, I remember this vividly. We had the biggest house in Miami. This house is probably $200,000 a month right now if you were to rent it out. But we had the biggest house in Bay Harbor in Miami, one of the best neighborhoods. And for 8 months, I did absolutely nothing. And I was printing $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 profit to me to the face a day, right? Like it was just like going like straight after all expenses, after everyone's paid, after all the cuts, like that's what I would make. And that was such a missed opportunity because if I would have kept my mind in an uncomfortable state, I could have it was the golden age of e-commerce. Facebook ads were running like nobody was really tapping into it. And instead I was just like kicked back at this complete castle of a home. And I was just like living my best 21-year-old life. But But we'll get back into that in a sec. But the point is being uncomfortable is key. And I don't know where I was going with that, but
no, I completely agree. I think it's something where a lot of times complacency is something that all of us fall into from time to time. Of you just get used to the situation that you're in, and that's why I almost feel like in the NFT world, in the crypto world in general, we're in a huge bear, right? And with that, I feel like the times when you go on Twitter and like everyone's like the days when there's like a massive drop, right? And with Solana, we've experienced that to even greater levels, right? And when you go on Twitter those days and it feels like kind of the world is ending at certain times like that, I feel like the weeks after that are some of the most productive weeks because everyone kind of says, hey, I can't just pretend I'm still in the situation that I was in last week. And so I need to get going and start making shit happen and making moves and everything like that. And that's something that to me is like when we're in a Super Bowl, like we were in 2021, right? It's almost boring. It doesn't challenge you, right? Like pretty much anybody can do anything and it'll succeed at that moment. But then you get in times like this where we don't know when that next bowl is. Is it going to be 3 years from now? Is it going to be 4 years from now? We don't really know, right? Or it could be 6 months from now. We don't really truly know. Probably not 6 months from now. But with that, I feel like you need to be in those uncomfortable environments. Otherwise, you just get stuck in this like cycle of complacency. And eventually you realize that you have to keep doing certain things to keep your life fulfilling. Otherwise, if whatever you think currently fulfills you, at some point probably won't, right? And so I actually want to get into that because when I was listening to some of the podcasts that you had been in, the list of success that you've had is pretty crazy. All the things that you've gotten, right? You have 2 homes, if I'm correct on that. You have a Rolls Royce. You have done all these crazy things. You've made a ton of money through e-commerce and everything like that. I believe if I heard a story correctly, you wore Red Octobers, which if people don't know, those are like $20,000 shoes. You wore those to a party. So you've done some pretty crazy financial accomplishments, right? But what I want to hear from you is what has been the greatest accomplishment that you've had so far outside of financial accomplishments? Whether it be something that you did for somebody, obviously like that train ride where you're giving away clothes to homeless people and everything like that. That's incredible. Outside of that, what has been the greatest accomplishment that you've had outside of financial accomplishments?
I'm going to answer that. But one thing I want to point is the things that you'd mentioned, you'd be surprised how much those things have affected me negatively. A lot of that stuff has been a plethora of mistakes. And so I'm dealing with something internally, just speaking openly before I answer that question. I have an insecurity of just like always being lesser than everybody growing up. Like I always felt, it's funny. I compare myself to like Naruto Uzumaki. If you guys have ever watched Naruto, like Naruto being like bullied in the corner, like that quite literally is how I felt growing up, whether that was like actually how it looked like or not. Like I always felt like the odd one out. And so I have this thing where I'm conscious that like that stuff is stupid. Like a Rolls Royce, like I spent too much money on that car. And I'm like, that's a stupid decision. Now I can afford it, but that doesn't matter. I could do so much with that money in terms of helping people. But there's something in my mind that I haven't been able to conquer that insecurity yet. Something I'm working on the daily basis. My biggest accomplishment, that's not a financial accomplishment because I would have easily said retiring my mom. But I guess that would be a financial accomplishment, right? With that, I would, because it,
Somewhat. I feel like that is a huge accomplishment that I think is outside of personal financial accomplishments.
Yeah, so I had this like little group that I started. It's like not something that I'm actually kind of well known for it outside of like the Web3 and crypto world. I've like since it's kind of been like shut down since. I keep in touch with like this like little pod of them that I have built a really good relationship with. But there was a lot of things that I knew how to do that people didn't know how to do. And so I created this little Discord group and I would funnel in people that I felt like had the right tenacity to like be a part of what we were doing. And I changed like a lot of kids' lives in that group. And people, I think there's like a negative connotation because it's like, oh, like you have a group, like, you know what I mean? What are you? And I never ran ads. I never pushed it. It was something like you either knew or you didn't. And if you knew, you could be a part of it. And I thought about it. That was so fulfilling to me. Like when I tell you there's kids that have came out of that were 15 years old making $1 million a month that put their whole family away. dudes who started with $500 now have more money than me, right? Like tens of millions of dollars rich. Absolutely incredible. Like, because my mind is framed a certain way. There's certain information that I couldn't utilize to its full potential that once it was translated to people with different minds and different skill sets, they just completely blew it out of the park. And so my whole little like Netz ecosystem was one of the best things I've ever done. That's not a financial accomplishment for me, but the financial accomplishments that I was able to nurture for other people. And that's one of the things about NFTs that I think is so cool. Like if I do my job right, if I do what I need to do, I can change 5,000 people's lives, or at least impact them in a really positive way financially. That's really cool to me. And like, I don't take that responsibility lightly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that is probably one of my more favorite aspects of the NFT world, is that truly when you have a project that does incredibly, incredibly well, it really does change the life of the people who hold it, right?
Yep.
When I minted my D-Gods, whatever it was, a little over a year ago, I didn't know my life would change in the way that it did, right? If anything, I was almost ready to be done with NFTs because I had been rugged so many times and lost so much money at the time that I was like, man, I can't just keep doing this. I'm throwing money at projects every other day and then deleting their Discord and just leaving the space, right? And so I was really, really exhausted with it. And then I met Frank and obviously got involved with the D-Gods community and everything like that. And I realized how powerful a successful NFT project could be. But before we get into that, and because we'll talk a ton about NFTs and everything like that, what I wanted to know from you is that, so one of the other goals that I had heard you mention at one point was that you wanted to get to the point where you had $100 million, and that basically at that point you would have true financial freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I want to know, what is your goal then when you get to that point? Once you have true financial freedom, you don't have to worry about really anything at that point. What does your life goal become?
I'm a really good money mover. And I also think I can identify talent really well. And so venture's been my passion ever since I was 20 years old. So I started my own venture fund, just me. I'm the GP, I'm the LP, I'm everything. I've deployed $3 million over the last 3 years, and I've hit really big on a couple. There's been like an unrealized gains on 3 million. It's at least a 30 to $35 million unrealized gain with, 5 misses out of 16, 17 investments, right? I mean, conclusive misses, but there's been like a couple really big hits. And I feel, my passion is to help people and to change the world. Like, it's corny, I know, but that's what makes me happy and that's what fulfills me. So it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks. Venture investing is really interesting because the chain reaction, I think, is one of the most powerful things that you can do. And so if I invest into you and I give you money to start your company, hopefully your company solves a real problem and helps people. And as you scale, you will hire people, and that will put food on the table for many families. And the chain reaction there, I think, is really, really impactful. I mean, one venture investment can have, like, the guys who invested in Uber, talk about how much they changed the world, how much that did for the American economy, for the GDP, right? Like, taking people who could barely make ends meet. I wish Uber and DoorDash, if these things were around when my mom was struck, like Airbnb saved my mom, saved us from really going under. As miserable as I was because of it, Airbnb saved us, dude. Like, truly did. Because that was square footage that, though was very inconvenient to allocate to somebody else, it paid the rent. A rent my mom couldn't afford to pay. That's what I want to be a part of. And I think I have a good enough finger on the pulse, and I think I have a good understanding as to what's a good idea and what's not, and who's a hustler and who's a true visionary to, like, if I have $100 million, allocating it proportionally, being able to take, 20, 25 of it and being able to place the right bets in the right places. I think that's enough to put me I think I can make enough good bets to make me a billionaire.
Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt you, and I don't say that lightly either. And it's not something where I'm just saying this to you because you're in front of my face. There's certain people I feel like you meet in life where you go, holy shit, that's somebody that like I would bet my life on. Like there's somebody that I just strongly believe in. And when I met Frank, I had the same feeling. And people ask me all the time, like, how do you feel when you're recording one of those podcasts with him? And I often talk about it feels like we're changing things. It feels like we're literally creating history at that moment when we're recording it. And even when I was prepping for this interview, I was like, I'm super excited for this because I know Luca doesn't know shit about me. We haven't met yet, but I'm watching these interviews and I'm getting an idea of who he is and what he's all about and what he's done. And I know that that's a person that I would unbelievably bet in because there's certain people who have it and there's certain people who don't, and you have it. And what I mean by it is the ability to change life for so many other people. And the fact that you already realize you're what, 24?
Yeah.
I'm 30. And so the fact that at 24, you already realize the power of what you can do, not only for yourself, but for other people. That's something that so many people my age don't even understand yet. Right. And I don't like bringing up age a lot because to me, it's kind of a crutch for a lot of people of like, oh, I'm young, I'm this, and that, or I'm too old, whatever. It's a crutch for a lot of people. But the fact that you're like, mental mindset is where it is incredibly impressive. And once again, it goes back to you telling your truth about what you've been through, your experiences and everything like that, because all of those have led to where you are today. So I know we just talked about a lot of success stories and things like that. So I want to hear from you. What's been your biggest L? Just your biggest, boy, this one didn't work out.
Oh boy. There's really two L's. I think one I already explained earlier where complacency had allowed me to miss on, I think, was one of the golden opportunities of our lifetime where you could literally have printed cash out of thin air. And I had so much data. You have to understand, I've had websites get 20 million hits in a month, right? Like data that I was not reworking and repurposing because it's like, why? I made $500,000 this month. Like, why should I go repurpose data? And it was taking, all the money was coming out of the business into our pockets. We just distribute. It'd be like dividends. And then we'd start from zero at the end of the month. Maybe we'd have some overhanging inventory. I'd foot the bill. It is what it is. That was my responsibility. And we'd move it. There is one business in specific that was a crucial failure. So I had realized what I had realized. I basically had about 18 months of just pure complacency. And when I came to the epiphany that I was like, geez, I'm now seeing a bunch of guys make more money than me clicking buttons on ad platforms. I went to Peter, who you'd met, who's our chief creative officer. So about 50% of all my businesses, Peter's touched, right? Like has been a part of in some capacity, whether it was a partner, whether, sometimes I just retained his agency. But Peter and I are kind of like the dynamic duo because I think I'm an elite brand awareness and marketing person. And he's an elite creative person. I think the two have to mesh to have a successful company. I think creative and marketing work hand in hand. So we call each other the dynamic duo. But our first company was basically taking what I had already accomplished and trying to build an infrastructure arm where, hey, we're moving product, but let's build like standalone brands with this competitive edge. And so, to give you guys some context, I was really just a product mover. We had the same set of 8 different products that we would just plug and play to different likenesses and we'd move them. And so I thought to myself, well, we're not really building brand equity here. We're making a ton of money, but brand equity isn't being built. And when you're we're doing 10, 15, $20 million a month in revenue some of these months. And that's like really foolish to make that much money and to not have like a brand anchor in which that's all kind of appreciating because it never matters how much money you make. Brand equity is everything, right? It just for anybody listening, like brand equity is what's going to make you really rich. Doesn't matter if you make $5 million a year, $10 million a year. I can work for 3 years and get an exit of $500 million and I'll make exponentially more than you will making $10 million a year for 20 years. Right? Like this is the key. Brand equity is the foundation to true wealth, right? You can be rich making money and doing the hand over fist monthly stuff, but true wealth is accrued through brand equity. And so we basically were looking to basically add this infrastructure and this ad agency layer to what we already had to kind of build brand equity. And we literally just took every bad beat. I don't know what it was, but we tried it out for 12 months. We incurred crazy overhead. We got an office in LA, dope office, way too much space than we needed, built a bunch of crazy things that wasn't necessary, hired way too many people, didn't have the right people in place. One thing that I learned on is cheap work is too expensive, free work is too expensive, right? Because I was expecting the best, but I wasn't paying people the best. And so I had a bunch of $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 a month guys that in reality, their role should have been paid 2 or 3 times that for what an elite person in that position gets paid. And so I had an abundance of dead weight, and we just took every bad beat. Every deal, we got screwed. I had bought millions of dollars in inventory on certain deals that I was doing with certain influencers, at the time, the biggest influencers in the world. And I just got beat down to oblivion. And I actually was close to losing it all. Now, it's a little dramatic because I have, like, if my bank account goes to zero today, I consider that losing it all, even though I have, like, tons of money in stocks and crypto. Like, I don't think of it like that. But I was actually, I had just bought a home. I'd taken care, sent money to a couple family members, taken care of things, and I'd lost so much money in such a short amount of time that I was like, oh, if I don't completely pull the plug out here, like if I could do another 6 to 12 months of this, I'm like back to square one almost. And so we pulled the plug and we just considered it a failure. Peter, on some just complete, like, we took a bad beat, gets a flight to Miami, like 2 days later, disappears. I was like, I hit him up later that week. I was like, hey, you want to get lunch and just talk about how we just got completely destroyed? He's like, I moved to Miami. I was like, whoa, we really got beat down bad. It was brutal, dude. I didn't even think it was possible, but you needed that. Now I know there's 5 things that went wrong. I know exactly how to avoid them. And that's what makes you a better entrepreneur. I don't think you can be an elite entrepreneur without serious failure. At least that's my thesis, but there's obviously those exceptions, like maybe Zuck or something. But
how long did it take you to go from that sort of the getting over the mental side of the failure aspect of that? Because at that point, you really hadn't failed at much, right? And so how long did it take you to get past that? Because I also know from watching these videos, you mentioned earlier your kind of Achilles heel, that you have that kind of that chip on your shoulder mentality, right? And I definitely could see that in certain podcasts. There were certain questions where I was like, man, I can see the chip on his shoulder. And I know that because I've always had a chip on my shoulder mentality. I always say that's from being short. And so my mom always tells me, she's like, Mark, like, you don't have to still have that chip on your shoulder. Like, you're good. No one's rooting against you. And I'm like, all right, but I still got it. Right. And I think it was always, even just going back to like high school and stuff, always being, kind of picked last for sports and stuff because I wasn't the tall kid. So you don't have the height problem. We're opposites on that end. But in terms of like, overcoming something that like I can imagine that had to be difficult for you because you're somebody who has a lot of self-confidence. You're somebody who at that point was crushing it at everything. So how long did it take you, and did something have to happen in order for you to kind of get the mojo back?
Took me 5 minutes.
There we go. Love that.
It took me 5 minutes. I mean, the second we shut it down, okay, if we're being honest, it took me 12 hours that night. Like when everything shut down and it was a conclusive failure. We admitted it. You know what I mean? It's like at one point you have to realize when something's a failure. Went home that night, ate some Crazy Rockin' sushi because that's what we did. Shout out Crazy Rockin'. But I woke up the next morning like, that time to I bode really well in adversity. Adversity is my superpower. Throw me in the pit. I do really well in the pit. I actually don't do really well when everyone's like, there's actually this moment in the NFT space, like, stop singing my praises. I haven't done that much. Like, I get it, but like, sing my praises when I really set the freaking bar. I think people like, now I like to be in the pit. Like I like it. I like the doubting, and everyone who's ever doubted me, I've made them rue the day 10 times over. And so I actually like being in these moments. And so when I felt like I think the hard part for me was like, there was a lot of people who believed in me in that business that I had set up deals with, that had sacrificed a lot. Peter probably being the most. Peter had a good little thing going on, and I pulled him out of that. And I said, hey, like, I'm going to give you this. Like, I'm going to make this happen, but I need you to like own this. And he did his part. Why that business failed was my fault. I can blame the universe all at once, but I'm the CEO of the company. So no matter what external variables I can blame, it's still my fault. So I'm not going to put the blame on the universe or external bad beats that were just complete anomalies. It was my fault at the end of the day. There was something I could have read in between each one of those misses that I think could have fixed. But I was really just upset for letting them down, because I can bring myself back up. I actually turn myself up when things go wrong. But people don't share the same personality as me, you know? And Peter was so like fat. I don't really know. He was just like, all right, we talked about it. He was like, yeah, this failed. I just had to go and start the new chapter. And I couldn't have done that in LA. And I was like, okay, I felt that, you know, but I felt like I let people down. And thing is I can go start the next company and take it to the moon, right? Which I did. But the same people who were with that company that failed weren't with me on the win. And that's what I felt bad about, because I don't want ever somebody to believe in me and for me to let them down. That to me is more painful than letting myself down. I can let myself down any day of the week. I don't mind that. I have a really hard time with people believing in me and me letting them down.
Well, hey, that's the best answer for a NFT project founder that everybody wants to hear, right? So
yeah, I guess, right? Yeah, I didn't think of that.
But no, I mean, I think that makes total sense. It's something that you know, it's knowing that you're going to be good, but then always wondering, is everybody else going to, right? Not everybody has the same mentality as you. Not everybody is able to see opportunities that are in front of them and things like that. And so with that, when did you, I guess, start learning about the NFT space, and when did you recognize that opportunity in front of you, and what made you interested in the NFT space in general?
So growing up with nothing, the second I had money, I began to collect things. I think it comes back, if you were to really rewind the time, every time there was show and tell, I had nothing to show. So the second that I had money, I think I was making up for all the years of show and tell where I had nothing to show. I like to show things. I think, again, that attributes back to that insecurity. So I love art. I love collectibles. I love watches. I had a huge watch collection. I've since trimmed it down, but I would at one point 40 watches. It was pretty incredible. And so there's a joke that my mom told me maybe about 2 years ago. She was like, you have no more wall space in your home in LA. And I was like, oh yeah, I don't. And so I have this, I was ordering a bunch of Kobe jerseys, signed jerseys and stuff, because I just love Kobe so much. And we just had nowhere to hang it. I was like, damn, no more wall space. And so I'm a huge collector. And I actually, during COVID, I spent way too much, millions of dollars on sports cards. Right?
Dude, same.
Yeah. No, well,
not millions of dollars, but a shit ton of money.
Dude, sports cards, I have the most epic collection of, and I actually went down the rabbit hole of Michael Phelps and really that abstract little world. But so I just that really created my fiending for collecting. I just there's something in the mind, the human mind. I don't know what it is. There's something mathematical there that triggers something like a serotonin or dopamine or one of these chemicals that just collecting does something to the human. And I'm a victim of that. And so when NFTs came around, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a serious freaking problem, because I've had ETH for a very long time. I have a lot of ETH, and there is so much cool shit. And so I just started clicking. It's just a better way to collect. It's all of the pros of collecting with absolutely none of the cons, right? So just at first I'm very big into Fidenza and Fewocious and some of this other rareable stuff, some of these fine artists, this motion. I'm like, oh my God, I'm just envisioning these rooms that I'm going to create in my next home of just all these moving pieces of art. Absolutely fascinated. And then my friends hit me up because, rewind, I'm kind of an elite. I was in the bull market an elite trader. So I'm an elite bull market trader. That's not saying much. But in the bull market, I print. I'm a money printer. And so I have this little alpha chat going, part of this little Netz ecosystem. and people are sharing like these PFP NFTs. And I'm like, okay, hop in the VC, like talk to me about this. Like, what's the case here? Like, what's the thesis? Some guy comes in, he's like, digital identity, community. I'm actually an introvert, believe it or not. I know it may not seem like it, but if my girlfriend would allow me and people would allow me, I wouldn't leave the house, right? I would travel to vacation and I would stay in the house. I wouldn't move anywhere else. There's no parties and no need for me to do that, right? But obviously I have to move. Neither here nor there. I'm an introvert, so I understand that. I understand having an identity online, right? Being able to like see other people with a part of this like community and us sharing the same values and the same perspectives, just like-minded individuals, right? And so I was like, ooh, this makes a lot of sense because, if this, everyone's on social media, if digital identity begins to take off, the ones that win, there's this finite resource, they're scarce, right? There's a huge opportunity for like immense value accrual. And so when the PFPs came around, I was like, oh yeah, this makes total sense now. My first ever PFP that I bought was a Pudgy Penguin because I thought to myself, well, if the narrative here is digital identity, the one that can attract the most people has the highest upside because simple value accrual model is you have a funnel. Top of the funnel is brand awareness. So if the narrative is digital identity, the more people that you can touch on this top of the funnel, 10 million, 100 million, a billion people, the more likely that they're going to trickle to the bottom of the funnel in which the NFT is at the bottom. Now, the NFT has a finite amount, 10,000, in Pudgy Penguin's case, 8,888, which means the more popular the identity is, the more scarce the resource becomes, the faster value accrues, right? There becomes a supply shock, right? And so all you need is 10 million people to know your brand and to participate in your brand's ecosystem, because then 100,000, 1%, will be hardcore fans and participate in fandom. And then you have this 8,888, and there's only 100,000 people. Let's say, okay, of that 100,000, 10,000 of them are millionaires or affluent, right? Have access to a lot of capital, which I think is a fair assumption of, it's the 1% for a reason of 10 million.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
0.01%. Then you have this perfect recipe for something that's worth millions of dollars in floor, right? That was the thought process. That's actually my thought process today. A huge part of what we're doing at Pudgy Penguins is brand awareness, right? Brand awareness is key. It's objective number one. With a brand that everybody knows, you can do anything. You can sell product, you can push games, you can do film and TV, you can, have a high floor price on your NFT. That has a trickle down effect to things like tokens or other major liquidity events. Brand awareness is at the top of the funnel. That's why Bored Ape is number one, because they were able to catch lightning in a bottle and put on a masterclass in brand awareness when it mattered most. Guy Osiri put on a masterclass of influencer marketing, right? Digital billboards. That's really what a profile picture is from a marketing standpoint. But brand awareness at its key is probably the most important part. But I thought when I first bought a Pudgy, they're the most universal. So with no marketing, because again, people weren't looking at this like teams and brands and builders. They were looking at it like identity, and it's either going to stick in the market or it's not. So I thought to myself, well, to me, the Pudgy Penguins are the most universal and can encompass the most people. Because if you're looking at brand awareness, if you're anime, well, there's only so much awareness you can get with so many people because there's only so many people that like anime. If you're streetwear, there's only so many people that you can get brand awareness towards because there's only so many people in streetwear. If you're, the exclusive club, that's great, but there's only so many people that can participate in the exclusive club, right? Even though I think that's a little bit of a different model because it's less of a category and more of an objective. But the point of the matter is when if you're a game, for example, where there's only so many people that participate and play games, so you're marginalized. But Pudgy Penguins, to me, was the most universal IP in NFT, which meant that it didn't matter your age, it didn't matter your gender, it didn't matter your ethnic background, your profession, or your interests. You can identify with a Pudgy Penguin because anyone and everyone can identify with cute, right? And to me, I think Pudgy Penguins transcends cute. It's more than that. But at its core, you have this very net neutral IP that just emits and radiates dopamine and just a positive emotion. you can't look at a Pudgy Penguin and feel bad. You just look at that and like, you just smile, you smirk, you chuckle, you feel good, whatever that is. But it's never a negative emotion. I've never met a person who says like, yeah, like, no, like, dude, there's just something about that Pudgy Pengu that does something to the mind. Again, I can't explain it, that can't be replicated. It just has that it factor. I refer to it as magic. And I was like, this is the most magical IP and the most universal IP in NFT based on what I had seen at the time. And I feel this way today. I think that's a huge part as to why we're going to succeed, because everybody's either a little abstract, the lines are a little different. They're either like targeting like really male-centric, like boys angle, which I think Bored Ape is like trying to conquer, like the exclusive club for boys. I really feel that way. Though I again, people think I shit on them when I say that. I'm not. I really am not. I think there's a huge market for there, and I think it's a great strategy to accrue a really high floor price, which is really important to them and their business model. But like when you look at all these other projects at their core, especially the top 100, it's important because, you know, it's hard to reference all the hundreds of thousands of NFT projects. There's too much. I look at it in the top 100 because those are the people who are competing. Maybe the top 200, but those are the competitors, right? Those are the people that have a chance to get to number one. If you're not in the top 200, your chance to be number one is a lot. You have to get to the top 200 first to start thinking about being in the top one. But I look at all of them and there's always a caveat to each one of them where I, from a brand builder perspective, and this is maybe just my bias, but I felt this way when I bought Pudgy Penguins from an NFT and from a collector standpoint. And I felt this way so much so that I would spend $2.5 million to buy it. But there's something about all these other projects that has a caveat. Like every single one, there's some sort of marginalizing caveat. Pudgy Penguins to me is the only one that is not marginalized. There's nothing I can't do. Everybody else, I think, or there's nothing I can't do and there isn't anybody I can't touch, I think is the really important part. With everyone else, all of them are like boxed in some point, right? Like it's like, okay, if you're a game, well, that's who you are. Now, a game is a good box to be in. Just keep in mind, I'm not shitting on a game, but a game is a good box to be in, right? Or your art is too abstract and it's like, okay, you might be able to appeal to this demographic, but you just can't appeal to everyone. Like the art is there's too much of a taste to it, right? Like, and taste is good. I'm not shitting on taste, but again, I'm looking at who's going to be the face of NFTs, who's going to be the face of this business, right? The person who's going to be the face is the person who's going to be able to touch everyone and who's not like, I think Azuki's putting on a masterclass, but Azuki can't be the face of NFTs. It's an anime. Like they're the face of anime NFTs. They will be that, and they've conquered that. And that could supersede a lot of things. But who can be the face for every single person? That's a problem because you need that. If you want NFTs to win, somebody's going to have to do that. Bored Ape can't do that because they're getting high. They're doing fucking mutant farts. They're, popping keys out of buttholes and talking about buttholes. And again, I love them, dude. I'm a huge ape holder. I'm Bored Ape's demographic. I have a bunch of apes. I love my apes. I'm never going to sell my apes ever again, right? But we all realize that can't be the face of NFTs, right? Like, I hope we all do. And so there's this opportunity to be the face of this industry, to be the face of this space. And I believe we're the best position to do that because it's not hyper complicated. Anybody can look at a Pudgy Penguin and see there's no abstract lines. There's no things that are off place. Like, you'd be surprised, but you have to think about Middle America. You have to think about mainland China. You have to think about Argentina and Spain and Portugal, even Africa. Like, really think about what this technology can touch and the upside. And you look at the landscape of just the art and the positioning of the brands, everybody has a caveat. Pudgy Penguins is not.
I mean, that's a bulletproof argument, and I don't disagree either. I think that the only time anybody could, obviously the space is emotional, right? When people have money tied into something, they're hesitant to agree on something like that because then they're almost saying, well, then the project that I'm invested in has this ceiling, right? But the way that I look at it is, people talk all the time about like, oh, I think this project's going to be number one, right? My whole attitude on it is I don't really care what project ends up being number one, if I'm being completely honest, because the way I look at it is we need more and more projects that are at that like Bored Ape price that they're currently at right now,
Yep.
right? Then we need projects. We need, a bunch of projects that are at an average floor price of 500,000, a million, so on and so forth. If we truly talk about mass adoption, that will be what prices will be at mass adoption, right? And so with that, if you're holding a bunch of those different projects, well then cool. You're in a beautiful position. You're good and whatever. And if the projects that you're holding aren't number one, it won't really matter if the number one is so fucking high up that everything else is in a damn good price range, right?
Agreed.
And so I think you get into, once again, the emotional side of things where people will say, no, my project's going to be number one because of this. But I completely agree with you, because I think there are so many projects where I look at and I'm like, yeah, you fit this really nice niche, and that niche is awesome, but like that niche doesn't attract women, or that niche doesn't attract younger people or older people, or it's people who are into drugs or people who aren't into drugs, and yada, 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 right? And there's all these different projects that fit certain niches. But the ones that are, and that's what I really picked up when I was looking into Pudgy Penguins and learning about you and whatnot, that I really respected, was that being able to see that, like, because I can see that now, but I've been in the NFT space for a year and a half, right? And so I'm like, or a year and some change. I wish I had noticed that from the beginning. My whole attitude at the time was just more of like, to be honest, I wasn't really thinking that deep. I was just kind of going, I like that. Let me look into that. And then by the time, what I realized was that the founder is also somebody that is, to me, almost like in terms of like, do they fill these niches and whatnot? Do they have a mass market appeal and everything like that? But then also, do they have a project founder who can get them to that level, right? Because I think there are other projects, and I won't mention names because we'd get into you'd be saying some stuff that some other people would get salty about. But I could mention projects that I feel like could fit that mass appeal, but their project founder might not have the mindset of you, right? And I think that is something, mindset to me is something that's incredibly important. And when I was listening to your podcast, the thing that I really picked up about it that I enjoyed was that you have the mindset of like, if you doubt me, just watch. So even if you want to ride with me, then buy a Pudgy Penguin, and like this trip is going to be enjoyable. So come along for the ride. And if you doubt me, if you think I'm arrogant, if you think this or whatever, well then by all means feel free to doubt me. But you put the mindset in those people of, if you doubt him, boy, you don't feel too confident in doubting him, right? And so that was something that when I watched it, I was like, man, like, yes, a Pudgy for the majority of America is not affordable at this price point, right? Like for a lot of people, this is a lot of money, right? But for the people who can afford it, it's something where if I watch a video with you, you're somebody that I'm like, yeah, I bet he's going to be able to take that to that next level because he has the confidence in himself. And confidence to me is almost half the battle, because when you talk about an IP play, that's been something that people have mentioned a lot of times, right? Like, oh, this project wants to be the next Disney, right? And I'm always like, okay, well, yeah, everybody wants to be the next Disney. There's a reason why there hasn't been a next Disney. Disney's an incredibly massive company that's been around for so many years, right? So with that, how do you think the IP play pans out? How do you think that looks? Because I think a lot of people are banking on some of the projects that they hold. Oh, this could be a massive IP play, right? But we haven't seen that yet in the NFT space. So my question for you would be, what does a successful IP play look like?
It's a great question. And before I answer it, I want to touch on one point, because it's really important to note that when I say this about Pudgy Penguins, is not underestimate the potential of these certain subsegments, right? Like these certain subsegments and having the most exclusive club may warrant more value to that membership than the first edition Pokemon card, right? There's underground clubs that people don't know about that cost $10 million a year. I mean, there's things that you can't even fathom. The most expensive Pokemon card is, or the, floor of a Pokemon card's $1 million. So, one thing does not mean that another is lesser, right? I'm just looking at it from, how do we make Web3 mainstream, and who is going to be the face of that, and how is that going to help everybody else? Let's keep in mind, I want Web3 to win above all else. To me, I've made enough money to last many lifetimes that this is about legacy and about changing the world. And I believe Pudgy Penguins will play an integral part in pushing the space forward so that 100 million people are participating in Web3, and all of those people whose lives are going to change because of it. That's really important to me, right? And so when I say, hey, Bored Ape can't be the face of Web3, right, or can't be the face of NFT, I believe that statement for the reasons that I explained. But to say that they're not going to have an incredibly high floor price and be incredibly successful is not what I mean. They totally will, and they have the perfect model and the perfect angle to appreciate in price in astronomical ways, right? Because that angle that they're leaning into, this careless, free, immature boy, don't underestimate those guys, because a lot of guys have made a lot of money in crypto that share that ethos, 100%. Right? That is their brand, and that is their positioning. I'm just looking about it. If we want Web3 and NFTs to win, the family is going to have to get involved. The girlfriend and the wife will have to get involved. They have to. People that have, keep in mind, Asia has a really interesting set of rules that America doesn't have. Like, Asia is very about respect and like rules and morals and being tidy and being right. There's a certain culture there. That doesn't mutant farts and doesn't fly with mainstream Asia, right? Obviously, there's subsections of Asia and a lot of Asian people who don't care about that, right? And are a little more loose. But a majority people would, understand. Same with India, right? And so you just have to think about like who is going to touch all these people in all these different places. And I think we will play our role in pushing this space forward being that. To answer your question, what does it mean to be an IP company? It means a lot of things. But I think at its core is how do you create a brand, at least for us, that impacts people in a positive way, that educates, that creates content and product that people enjoy and love and create an emotional attachment to? I think at its core is how do we create an IP that transcends Web3 and that acts as the Trojan horse and infiltrates the mainstream to bring them here? And so our strategy and how we're looking at it is NFTs and crypto is intimidating and it's taboo. But Pudgy Penguins are lovable and they're not intimidating, right? And so if I can invade the hearts and minds of everyday people with these cute little Pudgy Pengoos, which is like, how can you like blink twice at those? Like, those are awesome. And they're like, just put a smile to your face. I mean, they really do. And if I can get them to fall in love with this brand, right? And they can consume our products, and they can consume our content, and we can amass views in the tens of billions and followers in the tens of millions and sell product in the tens of millions, then you have a moment where you've captured the heart of the everyday person in its respective geographical location. And once you do that, as you continue to strengthen that bond, you'll have an opportunity to educate. And when you educate, you tell them the story about what this actually is, what Pudgy Penguins actually is. Now, it's important that you have that audience first. I have no interest in educating them today because they'll fall off. It's not big enough to educate right now. But once the conglomerate and the awareness, right, at this top of the funnel is 10 million people, then the funnel goes like this to this bottom, but in between is education, right? And so you educate them to this origin story that is the Pudgy Penguin NFT project. And as you educate them, they will consume the NFT. And so there'll be a moment, people won't see it. It might take a couple of years, truthfully, because it's like, oh, how's the Instagram translating to the floor price? It's not, nor do I want it to. I want it to translate when I have 10 million followers on Instagram, though. And when I do, I'm going to hit you with such a nasty, beautiful, informal funnel. It's just going to pop the lid off of this thing, right? And it's not going to be just Instagram. It's going to be all of the other networks. I'm thinking long game. Everyone, I even occasionally I'll have certain people in my, like, chirping like a devil on my shoulder, right? Where it's just like, do something quick, do it now. You want to keep the floor price at a certain price. And I do, and I respect that. And like, I definitely know that trust is important to keep, and floor price is a representation of trust. But I bought this thing for $2.5 million, and I've committed the next 10, 15, 20 years of my life here. So I've got to think about, like, if you lose belief from now until when that real moment happens, that's okay, because I know the people who do believe will be rewarded, because I know the plan. I know my skill set. I know the formula. And that, to me, what I just explained to you, from a mathematical, analytical standpoint, just makes all the sense. Like if that worked, I know I'm going to get there, right? I just have too much experience in doing this exact like brand awareness craze. The product is too good. The IP is phenomenal. It's the best penguin ever made. It's the best penguin IP. Don't underestimate that, right? Because people love penguins. We have a great brand with a great message. We're all about uplifting people. We're all about helping people. We go out of our way to uplift people, right? That I'm just telling you, it's the perfect ingredients and the perfect recipe for a moment that you may lose faith at some point along the ride, and you have every right to make the decision that you're going to make. But this formula that I just outlined, it's going to take some time, and it's going to take a lot of energy and a lot of effort and a lot of resources, but we're committed. We committed so much that we bought this thing for a boatload of money that the formula to me makes so much sense. And that there's going to come a point that as long as I don't make foolish mistakes like huge mints when we don't have the overflowing inbound, like, you know, just the obvious things that just people did because they got greedy. I'm not greedy here. I don't need to be greedy. Again, our whole team is well off. That's also like an important fact. Like we all have been really successful. One of the things that I think is beautiful about our team is we're all C-level operators, right? Like our whole C-level team could be the CEO. Like anybody on our C-level suite could be the CEO of this business, which is beautiful. But like the recipe to me, like how I've just seen it happen time and time again, it's like that moment is just going to be just so explosive, the likes of which I believe we've never seen. I just know it.
But yeah, man, I mean, I completely agree with all of that. And to me, it's like, these are the sort of things where when I look at it at buying into these NFTs is, do I believe in this person to take it to the point that we want to take it, right? And I feel like a lot of times we kind of, because the space moves so quick, a lot of times we think of like, well, is this project going to moon in the next like 2 months, right? But to me, the more I look at it is like, during times like this, especially during a bear market, if you believe in something and you stockpile that thing, then when we get into the next bull, you're going to be in a beautiful position, right? And so with that, I truly do look at like, am I investing in somebody who I believe can actually carry out what they talk about? Because there's a lot of people who talk about, oh, I want to do this, this, and this, but talk is cheap. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's all about what can you actually do? Have you actually done anything like this, right? And you obviously have that ability. My question for you would be, so you've done a ton by the age of 24, but with that, there's a lot of things, right? And so there hasn't been like, oh, I did this one thing for 10 years, right? So when you talk about putting your next 10 to 15 years into Pudgy Penguins, currently you haven't done that into something else, right? And a part of that's just your age. You would have had to start at 14 with something else, right? Yeah. So what makes you confident that you won't lose interest at some point of like, hey, been there, done that. I've been working on Pudgy for a while. I'm ready for my next chapter. I'm going to sell it to somebody else and move on.
There's too many facets that are entertaining. Like it is with a D2C and CPG business, that's all it is. Let's really break down in detail what an NFT project business is and its moving parts. I've always alluded to this, but like let's really break it down. You have to have a clothing business, right? Which for most people, I mean, there's plenty of clothing companies that are full-time clothing businesses. I'm committed 2023. We have to have at least 5 to 6 clothing drops. So I want to make a real clothing arm here. So you have a clothing business, which is a business in and of itself. You have an events business, 4, 5, 6 events a year, right? That's a business in and of itself, probably a smaller one, right? Not that big of a deal. You have an events business. We have a toy business. We actually have 2 toy businesses. We have our mass market toy, our plushies, you know, our clip-on plush, the things that people really love. And we have our collectibles, right? So we're at 5. You have Web 2 community building, which is different than Web 3 community building. So you have Web 2 community building and Web 3 community building. You can quantify that as just community building. But it's important to note that there's 2 different types of community building. You have technology, which is a huge part of this, right? You know, our goal is not only how do you bring NFT IP to the real world, how do you bring NFT technology to the real world? So you have that business. You have your Web3 royalty business model, right? Which is like That's not technology. That's just floor prices and shipping like announcements on like Twitter, right? And like that to me is not the technology business. That's just like Web3. It's not community either. There's a whole pipeline there. You'd actually be surprised. It's a lot more difficult than people think. You have a content business, right? The content business subsegments into different platforms, right? Because TikTok content is not the same as Instagram content. Twitter content is not the same as, but we won't even count that. You know what I mean? It's not the same as Instagram and TikTok content. Giphy content is not the same. So out of the content, we're at 10 facets now. You probably maybe 2 of them are little nothing burgers. So you're at 8. But then the content one is actually probably 4 into 1 because people like our Instagram page, for example. I know guys who make millions of dollars a year on Instagram, growing Instagram pages. That's their only job is make Instagram content and monetize. It quite literally in and of itself is one business. There's a group of people managing our Instagram. To do one video on Instagram, you have the strategy, the screenwriter, the illustrator, the animator, 4 people to make one simple little Instagram post. Because none of us on the team, our core competencies are in making content like that. Maybe you might have like a group who can like draw it and one person can do it all itself, but it's a one-man army, one-man job. Good luck finding somebody like that. Those are very rare, right? TikTok, it's a 3-person strategy for the video, person filming it, person in the mascot, right? Giphy, same flow, right? You have illustrators, you have animator, you have idea making. I mean, this is a 15-man team just for the 4 platforms, each of which have a 4 to 5 units, in each. So the content is not to be underestimated, and content is key. I mean, everyone says this all the time, but in an NFT business, one of the things that I think we're doing better than everyone else, we're just shipping quality, consistent content every single day. No one's doing that in this space because everyone else is neglecting all the other platforms. Complete foolishness. But they're doing it for a reason because there's so much already going on that to do the content business correctly, you're adding a huge thing to your plate. But it's necessary. It's a mandatory, no exceptions, truthfully. And so you have that. And there's probably a couple others that I'm missing. You have merchandise, toys, collectibles, content, and then you grow the whole thing. then you have to like grow the whole thing, put on a master class of just listening and communication, which is so draining, right? So think of me from the CEO perspective. My team has to handle all of those facets, right? Because my job is to be the voice, the visionary, and Web3 won't allow you not to communicate. So a lot of people think they can just go raise a bunch of money and shut up, or make a bunch of money, raise money from their community and just shut up because there's a lot going on, and there is. But that's not how Web3 works. So for me as a CEO, my team is handling those facets. Now, I obviously plug and play, and is one of my cons, but also probably one of my superpowers is I micromanage a little bit some of these things because I just want to be a part of it. I think I'm really good at product. I think that's one of my superpowers that people don't really know me for. I beat product up really well. Like I can see right through things that suck, and I can tell you a million things that you would never notice that suck, right? But the communication aspect is incredibly draining. So if you don't have the team, you can't communicate and execute. So we have the team. So my team is in charge of executing. So talk about what it takes to execute on all 10 facets at a high level. Kudos to people like Peter and Lorenzo and Nick and V and Vedant and all these people. Without them, we'd be Jennifer, we'd just be completely screwed. Kevin, completely screwed. And then my job is I honestly would like to be more involved in the 10 facets, but that's not acceptable in Web3. I have to be a champion. And I have to be spreading the vision, building trust, communicating, listening, and then in the community building, don't underestimate, community members that come in and cause chaos. I mean, this is the thing what people don't understand. I think this is an important note for anybody listening. If you're a community member, please try your best not to fight with other people, whether it's outside people, because You guys have no idea that one community drama scenario will take my attention the whole day. Now, it shouldn't be that way, right? But there's been like maybe 1 or 2 moments where things have really gotten hectic. And that you're shooting your own self in the foot when you create chaos in a Web3 community, because it's not just like, oh, hey, you do it and you get rid of it and you're on to the next. Like, it's emotionally draining. Like, I have all of these things that I'm dealing with, and then somebody feels entitled to like call somebody some really negative thing and then point fingers and say, this is really, thankfully no one's attacked me personally, but they might attack, a member of our community team or our mod team. And I understand there's differences, but you have to understand like what that escalates to in the background is just a complete emotional drainage for that day. Just complete emotional drainage. There was one day in specific, I think there's only been 3 days this has happened to me in 9 months, which I think is a blessing. I think a lot of people deal with this a lot more. But you ask yourself why some people aren't getting things done, because you guys are you're emotionally draining these people. And I'm in such a beautiful situation because I bought the project. I've given to the community. I've never taken other than royalties, but it's like, okay, that's the business, right? Like, so I don't think I think I get it the least compared to everyone, right? But I'm also not going to be the guy to be like, yeah, I'm completely removed from the situation. I'm on this pedestal. That's just not my nature. I'm empathetic. So if there's a really big problem and there's a disagreement between like 2 community members, I will step in. That's just my personality type. I care too much. I love Pudgy Penguins too much to go and let community members fight, especially people who have, been around and stuck around and committed to this for a very long time. Like, I want you to feel like you're heard and you're taken care of. But boy, oh boy, there was one time where I was just like, I slept. I just like went to bed. I just like was like, all right, I'm done for the day. It's 4:00. I'm knocking out, because this is just like, this is hard, dude. That is really, and I encourage everyone listening, because this is going to be a Web3, NFT. If you're a community member and you know that your founder is trying, just support. And try your best to be a good community member. I'm not asking you to go build businesses around your IP. You do not, I would love that. I love that. There's nothing better that you can do for me than that. But at a minimum, the one thing that I ask is just please try not to create chaos or FUD or internal friction. If you have disagreements, you're entitled to that. You can talk to me. That's why I do these inner igloos in the Discord, is so you can talk to me, so that you can vent this to me in a respectable way and we can address it. But this just like behavior of just like creating chaos, I empathize with so many founders, dude, because I know I get the Pudgy Penguin community is so cool. They're so dope. They're so funny. They're all good vibes. Like, the nature of a Pudgy Penguin attracts good people. Like, bad people aren't buying Pudgy Penguins. The art doesn't warrant that. You know what I mean? Like, you just have to be wholehearted in nature. You have to be a kind soul to buy a Pudgy Penguin. Oh my God, that sucked. You have to be a kind soul to buy a Pudgy Penguin. So I get the worst of it. And the nature of the deal is like, nobody can be like, well, you took $10 million in mint funds from us, so work harder. I don't have that relationship. So I get the least of it. I mean, I would imagine I probably get the least of it out of anybody.
Yeah.
Most likely. Right? And wow, those couple days have been brutal. And so I can only imagine. This, I think, is a huge part of what I think is holding the space back, is just some of these personalities that feel like they can bully people. And you can bully, you can't ever bully people, but you can translate your reservations, one, in a kind way, right? And in a respectable way. And you can also, relay, you're entitled to have your reservations. You're a collector. And so you can translate that. But there's a difference between vocalizing your opinion and being a bully. And a lot of people feel really empowered behind this anonymous character on their screen that they bully people. And I don't get any of that from the Pudgy Penguin community, and I'm thankful, right? But boy, do I see so many projects just light themselves on fire because people think they can be bullies. And what that does is, as long as your project founder is trying and they're trying and they're working hard, it's your obligation to support them, because if you don't, guess what? You're hurting them, sure, and they're definitely feeling it. But if your bag really means that much to you, guess what? You're hurting yourself way more, because it's your money on the line. And I can tell you right now that some of these guys who get beat down, like how they tried to beat down Frank a couple weeks ago, my God, the audacity, dude. You know what? Like, dude, he works so hard. That kid, I can tell you, I've seen it. That kid works so hard. He works so hard at the expense of his own physical well-being. He's like, I'm just working, grinding for my group. He cares about the D gods and youth holders, the likes of which is uncomparable, you know, like, and they're just bullying him, dude. It's just, it's holding the space back. You can't ever do that. I hate to use Frank as the example. There's tons of examples. You know, they did that to Frank and Gordon. I mean, to Gordon and Garga. It's like, dude, like they're working, man. You can tell they're really trying. And so the people who are really trying, you just have to, you're just only hurting yourself. I mean, we went on a tangent, dude. I'm sorry. I'm the king of tangents.
No, this is real conversation.
Yeah.
There's an entitlement to the space, right? And there's an entitlement that people believe that they're entitled to every answer, right?
Yeah.
And so that's been something that's been frustrating to me because I've gotten to know a lot of different project founders from the podcast. I mean, people are chilling on my couch. It's hard to not get to know people when they're sitting here, right? And so a lot of times I've gone out to eat with people and I've gotten drinks with people and I've become good friends with a lot of these people, right? And then you see somebody who feels like they're entitled to an answer about a project, who doesn't know the founder, has, you know, maybe they've barely been involved with the project and things like that, but they believe they're entitled to every answer to every question that they have, right? And to me, it's an entitlement problem more than anything else of like, there's a reason why we don't know everything in life, right? And I almost feel like, and we could almost turn this into a political aspect of things. We won't, but I do believe that there's part of our culture in America that believes that we should know everything, right? But I also believe that we aren't meant to know everything. There's certain things that our brains aren't meant to, we just can't process because it goes back to our experiences, right? We process everything, the information that comes into us based off of our experiences, based off what we know, right? But if you don't know, there's so much stuff in the world that you'll never know everything about everything, which means that there's certain things that you shouldn't know about because you're not mentally able to process that and understand it to the level that somebody else who's been in that field for so long can, right? And so I feel like once again with NFT projects, going back to that realm of things, there's a lot of people that don't know everything about the inner workings of, you know, how OpenSea works things or how Magic Eden works with different projects. And they don't understand how a project founder has to manage all these different, you just mentioned like 15 different things that you have to manage, right? Somebody who's just holding Pudgy Penguins doesn't understand that because they don't know, they haven't walked a mile in your shoes, right? And so as a result of that, there's a lot that you can't understand, which means you shouldn't need the answer to everything because you don't know everything that's going on. And you would be sitting here for hours explaining every aspect of Pudgy Penguins, every aspect. Somebody would have to follow you 24 hours a day to know everything that happens, right? And so with that, you need to trust that certain people have your best interest at heart, right? And so to me, once again, when it goes to a project founder that I'm really bullish on, it's one that I feel like, hey, you know what? I don't need to know everything, but I trust that that person has my best interest at heart, right? They're trying to take care of me as a founder, right? And Frank has said it before, and it's something that I really respect, is that he goes, Mark, I'm not worried about somebody like you. And what I mean by that is you're an OG minter, right? My total intake into the D-Gods ecosystem is 4 Solana, right? And I have 2 D-Gods and 4 Utes as a result of that, right? And 6,000 dust and everything like that. I've done well with D-Gods, right? But I've only put 4 Sol in. He goes, dude, I'm worried about the person who bought at the peak, right? The person who paid, $36,000 for a D-God when that was a floor price, right? And that person is underwater right now. And so he knows that person's going to be the one who's salty about something if the floor price doesn't go up because that person financially has been hurt by this, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, and I listen to that and I'm like, yeah, I understand that. And so once again, I believe in certain founders who I know have the best interest of their holders. And with that, you have to let them do their job, right? And I think that's the part where, once again, people who are listening to this, you have to understand that of like, if you believe in a founder, then let them do their job. If you don't believe in a founder, if you don't believe that they're going to carry this project to the level that you know it can go, maybe that's a project you need to sell. You know, maybe that's a project that's just not right for you to hold. If you don't believe in that person to take it to that level, then maybe that's something you need to get out on. And it does make sense, once again, with Pudgy Penguins, because that's essentially the reason why you took over Pudgy Penguins, right? Because the previous founders, and I don't know everything that happened there, but there was, from what I read, some issues with the community and the founders and them not really being on the same page. And so you stepped in. It was something that you believed in strongly, and you paid $2.5 million in order to secure Pudgy Penguins to take it to the level that you could take it, right? But there's a lot of people who obviously can't afford to just buy a project when they don't like the direction that it's heading. And so with that, and there's a lot of people who shouldn't be a project founder. That's the other thing. And so once again, if you believe in a project and where the founder is going to take it, then let them do their job and don't be a nuisance to them. And if you don't believe in where they're taking it, then why are you holding it?
Just sell.
Yeah, 100%. So with that, I want to go back to the valuation for a second, because I'm curious, how did you come up with the $2.5 million valuation?
It was the low anchor. So the real number was $7.5 million. I was ready to spend 7.5. I was like, hey, current bid, I think, was 2. All right, 2.5. And they took it. So that was like my low anchor. I mean, dude, that business had netted $7 million up until that point, right? So 5 months, $7 million, buy that same company for 2.5, steal the century. When you negotiate, you hit with a low anchor, and then so you hopefully they rebuttal with a high anchor, and then you meet in the middle, and then you get a deal that you think both of you guys are happy with. I came out of there with a thief in the night. I couldn't send the ETH fast enough. It's like, before you change your mind, But at the end of the day, I was buying a distressed asset, right? Like in hindsight, you could say whatever, but it was a distressed asset, and it could easily went the other way.
Yeah, 100%.
I could have easily not matched with the people. Could have been huge friction. Thing could have went bottle up. We couldn't have. There's something about the Penguin that is so special that like once we made our Instagram, it just took, dude. Like these things, like it didn't need to take. That's why I know the toys and the collectibles, because every moment we shipped something, whether it's a piece of content, whether it's the NFT, like it took. And that's not my doing. That's the doing of the Pudgy Pengu and the magic that is the Penguin. There's something magical there. You can disagree. It might not be your preference, but the undeniable magic. I mean, the kids had done $180 million in NFT sales before we took it over. No leadership, no future utility. You know what I mean? No experience, no real high level execution. Why? Okay, market timing. Sure, there's plenty of projects that time the same market that have had nothing. They traded that much volume, but it was because there's something magical about the Pudgy Penguin. Then it was proven when we launched our gifts. It was proven when we launched our Instagram. It was proven when we put certain testers out there and some of the things that we're doing in the background that nobody knows that we're doing. The Pudgy Penguin resonates and touches people. It's not to be underestimated.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I completely agree. It makes a ton of sense. So what I do have, I have two people that wanted to ask you a question, and so I got a video that I'm going to show you, and I'll put this on the screen for everybody else. But I'll play the audio for you.
Oh no!
And so the first one is coming from our boy Kevin D-Gods, and so he's got a question for you live from the airport. So I will play this for you.
Luca, Kevin D-Gods, dude, got a good question for you. First off, when will my daughter get a cool Pudgy Penguin sort of toy to go with her NFT? And then second question, can the rods be converted to gel blasters? Because that would be a fire reward. Thanks for taking the question.
Ooh, that's a fire reward. Hold on, let me write that down. Kevin D. Gods. See, that's why there's. I'll tell you. So being in this business, I know exactly who's competent and who's capable and who isn't. I've met with everyone. There's 4 teams I'm not going to name because then I think everybody else that I've spoken to is going to offend them. But there's 4 teams that are capable and competent. Everyone else is a complete nothing burger, and I would bet the house that they're all going to be nothing in like however 18 to 24 months, complete zero burgers. And it hurts me because I see so many community members so passionate and like pushing the narrative and spending so much money. And I'm like, oh my God, if you had any idea who's really running the ship here, if you had any wherewithal and any consciousness, you do this. But ROG claim to gel blasters. Oh, I'm totally doing that. That just seems like a great little piece of utility. So our products, I got kind of boozled. So it's really important because brand awareness is at the top of the funnel, but what you can't do is start shipping shitty products. Product integrity is key. So I have a playbook. And so the reason I had somebody reach out to me like, yo, Luca, be careful. Like, you're really confident in this. You know, there's a lot of variables you can't control. And I said, look, you know me, you know what I've done. I have a playbook that Web3 and crypto has never seen before. Like, I have like a real mass market playbook that nobody in this space has, you know, I have, geez, it's like I keep pulling it because of my freaking long elbows, dude. But like, I think maybe I have a hunch on who the Shiba Inu guys are. And I think they're like, it's like that type of elite type of playbook, right? Like elite manufactured success. Mine's different. Mine's like more DTC and CPG. I know that Web3 and crypto has never seen what I'm about to do in terms of how the consumer products are going to tie into all of this and how they're going to help in that brand awareness in a way that's never been done. And so I'm so confident in that playbook and my ability to execute on that playbook that I know we're going to solve the brand awareness problem. And so I can only assume based on the math that if I point it in the right direction and educate appropriately, that the value accrual to the NFT will be exponential. But the product integrity part is key. If I ship shitty toys or shitty product, then I've lost before I've even started. And so refining is important. Chinese New Year set me back a little bit, but end of quarter one, first couple weeks of quarter two, if it translates into April, is when we go to market with two of our lines. We go to market with our mass market toy line, and we also start shipping what I believe is going to be like our version of our Bear Brick, which is like this Pudgy Penguin collectible, one of ones, rare, like the rare ones, also pulling in licensing from the community. It's important to note for those of you guys listening, I license every product that we do. Every time there's a Pudgy Penguin involved in a marketing asset and content and product, I license it, right? So there's a value exchange for me, right? So the toys, same scenario, but I also want to collab with like brands and do like skins on the toys, right? And do like different editions and versions. And so that launches March, late March, early April. Like late March, early April, like a lot, like these first 2 quarters, we should do another one of these because everything should be a lot, at least the vision and everything that has coincided, like things should look a lot differently.
Yeah.
For Pudgy Penguins by summer.
That's the stuff I look forward to with these podcast episodes, because in my perfect world, we would do one of these every like 3 or 4 months, and then we'd come on here and we'd say, hey, last time you were here, we talked about this.
We'll do it every 6 months. I actually really like your interview. You do a great interview.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. So I got one more question for you. This time it's coming from the project founder of an NFT project on Solana called Ketz on Crack. Are you familiar with them?
I am familiar with them.
Okay, so this is coming from Peblo. So he recorded this, I believe, at 4 o'clock in the morning India time. So,
yo, Luca, Peblo this side. So I have 2 questions. Like first, what are the licensing avenues that you are looking for Pudgy Penguins in the near future? And how are the holders going to benefit from it? Yeah, bro, that's my 2 questions.
Shout out those guys, dude. They're awesome. I love the whole like Frank Mysterious on it. That's why I laughed. I was like, oh, the anonymous stuff is awesome. But so licensing is a huge part of our initiatives, right? But licensing only matters if you've created brand awareness, because no one's going to license your IP on product if they don't think that putting your penguin on the product is going to make the product sell more. Well, how are they going to do that? They're going to look at your brand awareness. They're going to, dude, I'm so fucking, this is like the 3rd time, bro. Like, my God. It's because I'm doing it like this.
It's it's single ear.
It's like the music studio rapper in me. Like,
back to your young days, right?
Yo, so Luca Netz in the booth. Eh? But brand awareness is key, right? And so I do think from a licensing perspective, there's a lot of things that Pudgy Penguins can do. Again, understand this statement and really absorb it, because this is like a huge part of the bull case for Pudgy Penguins. But Pudgy Penguins is the #1 cute and inclusive IP on the blockchain. We're the most family friendly, we're the most PG, and we're the most inclusive, period. In terms of top 100 NFT projects. Top 100. Undeniable. Undeniable #1. Disney is 100, $200 billion company selling cute and inclusive IP. People don't understand this yet in the NFT space, but the upside in the IP, if somebody wants to be an IP and a strong IP, which is what I actually think that's going to yield the highest upside. I think the highest upside for value accrual is either an exclusive membership, right? Or an IP. And your NFT is your first edition Pokemon card. Those are the only, I think those two, gaming too, because I almost shot myself in the foot there. Those are the three. Exclusive club, gaming, skins, status, right? Because, you're running a game. If you're the one of one in the game, you got the status, you're the head honcho, you're the big boss. Don't underestimate that. And then your first editions. NFTs are better first editions, right? So you have first edition Pokemon cards, you have first edition Magic Gathering cards, there's inauthenticity issues, there's friction in buying and selling, it's a disaster. You don't know how many there's out, right? At its core, what an NFT is to an IP company is the purest, most efficient, best first edition. So all you got to do is build the brand past that, and then eventually the first editions will do its thing. And so when you're looking at some of the initiatives that we want to pursue from a licensing perspective, I think Pudgy Penguins has a really amazing angle in consumables. So like Lay's potato chips, Haagen-Dazs, ice cream, cereal. These are things I'm super, super excited for. I think we can be on pizza boxes and like anything that's cold in the frozen aisle. I think we could just dominate that. Pudgy Penguins too, think about it. But at its core, you really can go anywhere. Lunch boxes, backpacks, right? Educational tech. People are not even thinking about that. Scholastic. I mean, I've thought about this at such a high level that like nobody even understands. I'm gonna put these things in classrooms in your first grade class, right? That might not mean anything to you. That actually means a lot to me and the brand because, again, thinking long-term vision, those people in those classrooms, their first touch of Web3 is going to be with Pudgy Penguins. And so when they become native, when they become successful, when they get into the workforce and they evolve as a human, it's all going to loop back to Pudgy Penguins, that first touch point. Pudgy Penguins is the first touch point. They're going to tell their parents, right? It's like it's a feedback loop that would really frustrate you if you like really try to process all that information. But it's tangible and it's real. And so we have some stuff coming up on the horizon. I'm not going to translate that. How does that benefit holders? Well, if I put a Pudgy Penguin on a cereal box, I'm paying a Pudgy Penguin holder to put their Pudgy Penguin on the cereal box. If I put it's not mine to just hoard and take. Like that's where a lot of these projects go wrong. This is where it's like a huge fool. It's like foolishness. It's not just you to go BD and take it all, take the whole pie and just greedy it up. They're so greedy, dude. People can see through that. I'm a firm believer that true intentions are going to win here. And like, I want to lead by example on those intentions and just, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the greed. I mean, there's a lot of people right in the space that are the faces of the space and the leaders of the space that I think are being really greedy. I don't want to be greedy. I want to win together. And I refuse to believe that that's not going to succeed. I just refuse, dude. I refuse that if I'm sharing the wealth and sharing the success, and if I go do a deal with Haagen-Dazs and I put 5 Pudgy Penguins on the ice cream, I could just draw those myself. You know that, right? Like when again, it's just going to sound like I'm shitting on people, but I'm not. But when, these projects do figurines, right? No one gets paid for that. When I do figurines, my crew gets paid for that. My community gets paid for that. Now, it might not be the entire community. It's just one person. But that's the difference between me and them. I think about them. Okay, I can't include all of you. We get that. But I'm thinking about you. I think about you all the time. I think about our holders all the freaking time, dude. All the time. It's all I think about. How do I involve them? How do I make this feel like it's ours, not mine? Because it's not mine. It is ours. Now, I can't go distribute shares to everyone and do that. That becomes a security. It's a disaster. So at a minimum, if I go do a Haagen-Dazs deal or a popsicle deal, or I go do a toy deal, like I want you a part of that success with me so that when this brand goes and does billions of dollars a year in revenue, hundreds of millions are coming back to them, but through the form of a real transaction, through a real agreement, not just phony airdrops that are coming out of the sky. right? Because right now, transactional utility is distributed in this space through airdrops of tokens or NFTs. At its core, that's a Ponzi scheme. Now, I've been a beneficiary of this stuff. I love it. And to say that we may not do that, like I would totally do a token, airdrop to the holders if it was legally in the bounds and I was allowed to do it. I would totally do an NFT airdrop to the holders and give them that value as long as our ecosystem had the overflowing inbound and it wouldn't hurt us, right? I would totally do these things. But at its core, in a bear market, none of those things work. So how are you going to create real utility that provides real monetary value that binds the user and brings them along for the ride of the success of this like Web 2 side of the business that I think is imperative? I think it's imperative that you build a real revenue stream selling real products so that you're not focused on this digital stuff, because eventually the house of cards will crumble. For example, if Bored Ape if this Mecha Mint goes underwater, but it won't, it's free. They were genius in it. But if they were to mint it, right, and they were going to charge for it, and that would have went underwater, they would have 2 collections underwater, other side, and then this. Good luck.
Yeah.
That would have been the start of the house of cards beginning to fall. You get a third strike, you're out. Second, you have 3 collections underwater. Doesn't matter who you are, Bored Ape, whoever, you're done. Because now nobody's making money. The reason why they can do that is because everyone's in the money. So if you're in the money, you can mint endlessly. It's a great business model. But the second, eventually you will become out of the money, right? It's not if, it's when, if you continue to mint consistently.
This is electric. I love this. So, okay, so my question for you then is, we talk about floor price and we talk about things that affect the floor price on a pretty regular basis. And so with that, I feel like a lot of times we are also under the belief that like when somebody puts out news, a lot of times what ends up happening is that in the come up to news, if you know that there's an event that's taking place in 2 weeks or a week or whatever, the floor runs up on that. And then the news comes out. And basically, no matter what the news is, even when the news is something that's decently impressive, the floor drops immediately 10 to 20% afterwards, right? And so for you, I'm curious to know, what do you believe is something that causes the floor price to go up and then also stay steady after that? And in reverse compared to what we're used to, which is the floor price going up and then immediately the news comes out and the floor price drops immediately afterwards.
Yeah, so for December is a great example of this. I could have blown the roof off of this thing, right? All attention was on us. But I'm in the long game and I kind of like the slow grind. I think once you go vertical, you come right back down. That's the problem, right? So I'm very strategic, actually, when it comes to just thoughts and like momentum. Like I understand what generates volume, right? Because I have an NFT, and so part of my business model is generating volume. I think we've cracked the volume code, right? And volume, I think, attributes to appreciation and floor price. But there's a balance, right? Because I don't want to go like this. I don't. Like when we start to go like this, I'm like, all right, we're not going to roll out. I don't want to. I don't. Because this just leads to this every time. It's just like the best thing you can do is just grind your way to the top.
Okay, so hey, this conversation has been electric, and I know you and I could probably go for another 2 hours, but I also know you've got a ton going on right now. You're in LA for, I know you got a ton of meetings and things like that. So I have one last question for you, and we'll wrap up from there. But I want to know, what is the one thing that you do every day right now that gives you purpose? I know that that's something, and it could be NFT related, it could be not NFT related. What is one thing that Luca does every day that gives him purpose?
It's working on this right now. This is my life. I live and breathe and die this, so much so my girlfriend is like, we got into an argument. She's like, this is all you think about ever since Pudgy. It's been different. And I'm like, yes, it has. Because this is my life. And I refuse to look like a fool. But that's it. Pudgy Penguins, dude. That's my life.
Well, I'm looking forward to the next chapter of Pudgy Penguins. I'm super excited to see everything that you guys do this year. I'm glad I finally met you. It's somebody that I've wanted to meet for a long time, and this was great. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come out here and do this. And, dude, we'll have to run this back at some point soon.
6 months, summer.
There we go. So, all right, Luca, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys soon. See you guys.